In this video, I'll look at the inflation of conflict fallacy. I'll start the video by describing the fallacy, talking through its forms, looking at some examples, and then talking about some reasons why people might actually commit this fallacy. So let's jump right into the inflation of conflict fallacy. So we'll start with the description. The description of the fallacy is pretty straightforward. Basically, an individual reasons from the proposition or sentence that experts disagree about some. It doesn't have to be all, just some aspect of a topic or subject to the proposition that nothing is presently known about that topic. So this is fallacious. Just because two experts or authorities in some field disagree about some sentence or aspect of a topic doesn't mean they disagree about the whole of the topic, and doesn't mean that nothing is known about that topic. Let's look at the form of this fallacy, the kind of structure that we sometimes see this inflation of conflict fallacy found in. So the form looks as follows. We have two experts, let's say they're A and B, and they disagree about some aspect, some feature, some component of a particular subject matter or topic, and we'll call that topic Y. Then the individual who commits this fallacy will conclude that because of this minor disagreement or this feature of the disagreement about a general topic, nothing can be known about that topic. So again, this is a fallacious argument. The argument is invalid. The first premise can be true while the conclusion is false. That is, experts can disagree about some aspect of a topic, but nevertheless, there's a great many things known about that particular topic. All right, well, the argument, of course, like many fallacies that are invalid in their structure, can be made valid by adding a missing premise. So we have, again, premise one, which is experts A and B disagree about some aspect of a topic, and then we reason to the conclusion that nothing can presently be known about that topic. So I'll go ahead and pause the video if you'd like, and try to guess what this premise is that we could add to make the argument valid, but as we'll see, is going to be false. Okay, welcome back. So if you guessed that the premise was knowledge is presently available on a topic only if there is no disagreement by experts upon any aspect of that topic. So this is the premise that is almost always unstated that we need to supply in order to make the argument valid. But when we do supply this premise, we can see that this premise is false. That is, we can know things about a topic even if we don't agree upon every aspect of a topic. As always, I think you learn most about fallacies by looking at some examples. So let's go and dive into some of these examples. So let's start with mercury poisoning. Two health experts might disagree about one of the symptoms of mercury poisoning. They might disagree about trouble seeing, whether it's one of the symptoms of being poisoned by, eating too much large fish or something like that and having mercury poisoning. And then an individual would reason from this disagreement that nothing can be presently known about the symptoms of mercury poisoning. Well, this would be fallacious. Just because the experts don't disagree upon every single one of the symptoms of mercury poisoning doesn't mean that this disagreement is against the backdrop of a large agreement about many of the other symptoms. So things like they might say muscle weakness, trouble with coordination, numbness in extremities, it's so on and so forth. And they say, yes, everybody agrees that these are the common symptoms of mercury poisoning. And if you were to say this, you would be in the know. But we disagree. We're kind of hesitant about whether trouble seeing may be one of the symptoms. So just because there's a disagreement about one of the symptoms doesn't mean there's a disagreement about all of the symptoms, and it doesn't mean that there's nothing that can be known about the symptoms of mercury poisoning. Let's look at another example. This one involves color experts. Let's say there is an individual who's an expert on color, and we have another individual who's an expert on color. And they disagree about whether a particular apple is a particular precise or shade of red. And so we might point to this disagreement and say, well, since they just can't agree upon the precise shade of red, that means nothing can be known about the color of the apple. Well, again, this is fallacious. Just because they can't agree upon the precise shade of red doesn't mean that they don't agree upon the fact that it is red, and doesn't mean that everyone else wouldn't also say, yes, that's a red apple. So this kind of disagreement about the details or the precise shade of red doesn't mean that nothing can be known about the color of the apple. So again, this would be an inflation of conflict fallacy, where the conflict is inflated from a disagreement about one precise feature of the topic to a disagreement about the whole topic. Let's take another one involving like fitness or working out. So we might imagine two fitness experts. They disagree about how effective a specific exercise regimen is for elite distance running. So let's say people running marathons at a competitive level. And so they might have a disagreement about whether, I don't know, you need to run 20 miles once a month or twice a month or something like that. So an individual who commits this inflation of conflict fallacy, what they would do is point to the fact that these two health experts disagree upon whether a specific exercise regimen is effective for distance running, and then they inflate that conflict. They would inflate it to apply to all knowledge concerning distance running. But this would be fallacious. Just because they don't agree upon this specific exercise regimen doesn't mean that there isn't also massive agreements upon many other things, let's say about eating healthy or other types of workouts that you might do. So just because there's disagreement about this specific matter doesn't mean there's disagreement about the whole of the topic. So now that we've described the fallacy, talked about its form, and went through some examples, let's speculate a little bit about why people might commit this fallacy. I think there's two reasons in particular why people might commit the inflation of conflict fallacy. The first is that they hold this kind of strange view that in order to have knowledge in a subject matter, there needs to be agreement upon every single issue in that subject matter. Another way of putting it is that unless knowledge is determinate in every possible way, then you lack knowledge. You might put this as a kind of motto: incomplete knowledge is no knowledge at all. The second reason is that people want to promote some controversial view, and they're not sure how to reject the dominant view that's out there. So let's look at examples of both of these. So I think some people might hold that incomplete or indeterminate knowledge is no knowledge at all. The problem with this view, though, is it just kind of leads to skepticism. Because as you increase the precision of your knowledge, as we start talking about, let's say an apple is red to a particular shade of red, as you increase like how determinate or precise the claim you want to make is, you tend to increase the amount of doubt or disagreement that is out there. So while people might agree about a number of vague matters, when you get really down to the details, people start to disagree. And so if you say like you have to have agreement upon every precise subject matter in order to have knowledge, this seems like it would eliminate almost every field of knowledge, except for maybe mathematics or some areas of physics potentially. And so the result is kind of strange, one that we might sort of shrug off. We might say, well, if you hold this view, then you're committed to this kind of hyper-skepticism about all subject matter. So let me look at the second reason, which I think is a little bit more interesting, and I have an example for. This view is that people commit the inflation of conflict fallacy because they want to promote a view that is not the dominant view. And they have trouble rejecting the dominant view on its own terms. So what they need to do is undermine it in some way. So how do you go about undermining this dominant view so you can push in your controversial position? Well, what you would do is you'd point to some small disagreement among experts in that area or people that hold that view. And then say, well, if they can't agree upon this particular area, this particular topic within their field, well, what do they know? They must disagree about many other things as well. And so we don't need to hold them in esteem. We don't need to treat their views as authoritative. They're not any more experts than we are upon a particular topic. And so any view on this matter must be equally good. And so if any view is equally good, then my controversial position is just as good as their view. And so by pointing to this disagreement, I've kind of put myself into the conversation as one of the experts, as one of the individuals who you can trust, as opposed to other individuals who may be more versed and trained and done the research. Okay, so let's look at an example of this. So let's say an individual wants to promote the claim that the age of the universe is 10,000 years old. Well, how would you go about doing this? Well, it's a little bit difficult to do it from, let's say, fossil records or many of the other scientific ways that are out there, but you might use the inflation of conflict fallacy to promote your view. You do this by saying, look, experts disagree about the precise age of the universe. One expert out there says the universe is 13.7 billion years old, while another expert says, oh, it's only 13.6 billion years old. And so they can't actually agree upon the age of the universe. And since they can't agree, well, there's nothing that can be adequately known about the age of the universe, and so every opinion is equally good. And so my view that the universe is 10,000 years old is one that you should accept as well. So here we've used the inflation of conflict fallacy to promote a controversial position. Let's look at another example of this. Let's say you want to cast some skepticism about the negative health effects of smoking because you want to promote your cigarette line or something along those lines. So what would you need to do? Well, one thing you could do is say, look, experts on this particular matter can't agree upon the exact causal pathway that links smoking to lung cancer. And so since they can't agree upon exactly or precisely what causes about cigarettes that causes lung cancer, we can conclude that they don't really have knowledge about that cigarette smoking causes lung cancer. And so you should be agnostic about it. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but that's for you to decide, not for these health experts. So we were able to cast doubts on the negative health effects of smoking simply by using this inflation of conflict fallacy. So this was the inflation of conflict fallacy. Thank you very much for watching. If you have comments or examples of this particular fallacy, I'd love to read them in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.